This is the magicwordpodcast.com.
Hello, this is Scott Wells for the magicwordpodcast.com. But perhaps I guess you knew that because, first of all, you're already here watching this, and you could probably tell by seeing my rather handsome t-shirt, which is available, by the way. You can purchase now, and there is the tiny URL underneath here that will tell you where to go to purchase one of these things. It was actually made by Mechanic Threads. There's a young magician here in Houston who had made this t-shirt for me, and he designed it, printed them up, and so when you go to the website, it will be his website. All profits go to him. Actually, this is just something that he has a very great design, t-shirt design, and coffee mugs, hats, and all kinds of other kind of cool stuff. But he had designed this, and I thought it's pretty cool. Thought I would just try to help him out a little bit. So if you're interested in helping to support him, as well as share the magic word, and can let everybody know also that you're a fan, that you can enjoy wearing the t-shirt when you go to magic conventions and other places as well. It's a very nice soft cotton. It's a longer length than usual shirts. It fits very well, and I really love it. So anyhow, his name is Jacob Rangel here in Houston. And so Jake is a nice artist, and a big shout out to you. And again, the website is right underneath here where you can go to that tiny URL, and because it's a longer URL, so I've shortened it. Anyhow, this week we're going to be having another wonderful episode with a great guest and a friend I've known for a long number of years, who I used to work with at the Magic Island here in Houston many years ago. He had come in and out on a regular basis back in the 80s, but he has also worked cruise ships and has been multiple award winner and nominee for the Academy of Magical Arts for many of the rooms where he's worked, as well as doing comedy clubs and working the Magic Island out in Newport Beach. We're all going to discuss that with his intro I'm about to tell you here in just a moment. But anyhow, I just wanted to welcome you to this another episode on YouTube of the video component of our audio podcast. So if you have not yet subscribed to the podcast, I suggest you go to themagicwordpodcast.com, and there you can then subscribe to the pod letter. And of course, while you are here watching this on YouTube, I suggest you just hit the subscribe button down below there and subscribe to this channel for Texas Magician. We've got a lot of really great stuff that's coming out. I'm going to back out of the way, and I'm going to start this introduction over during this conversation I'm having this week with my guest, Mr. TC Tahoe, here on The Magic Word. Hello, this is Scott Wells for the magicwordpodcast.com. Thanks again for tuning into this week's episode of The Magic Word. We have a wonderful guest with us here tonight, someone who is a world-class sleight of hand artist. He worked at the Magic Island in Newport Beach and here in Houston, Texas for a long number of years at the Magic Island. Yeah, that's right. And also, he does a lot of tarot card readings, and we'll talk a little bit about that then too. He was a two-time winner, Magician of the Year by the Academy of Magical Arts, and they had also nominated him, I believe, 5 times for the Stage Magician of the Year, 3 times for the Close-Up Magician, and 5 times as the Lecturer of the Year. And he is a very funny guy, worked at a lot of improvisational stand-up comedy shops around the country. Even Robin Williams has a Robin Williams quote on his website where he says, "You make me laugh." And also Denzel Washington thought he was great, too funny, too amazing. And Pierce Brosnan, one of a kind. Anyhow, he's just a wonderful guy and a very funny fella. I think you will enjoy having him, getting to know our TC Tahoe as our guest together today. So please welcome Mr. TC Tahoe. Hey, TC.
Hey, Scott. How are you?
Fantastic. Good to have you here as a guest this week. I've been noticing a lot of things like on Instagram where you have been designing a whole lot of stuff. I mean, like your promo material where it's very, very clever kind of things where you'll take like an old picture and add a little bit of a twist to it, or,
Yeah.
Are you a designer? Actually, did you start out like as a, or how did you get your design, your eye? I mean, it's very clever stuff.
Well, thanks. I appreciate that. No, self-taught. I lived out. I've only ever been a magician for a living, really. I got out of high school. I actually dropped out of high school about 3 months before I was supposed to graduate, and because I got booked at Newport Beach, Magic Island, from Montana, and I went out there for a couple of weeks and never went home.
Uh-huh.
At one point, about 6 years ago, I was living in Ecuador for 3 years. My wife and I had moved down there. Leslie and I moved down to Ecuador, and I didn't really tell anybody I was a magician. It wasn't like I was hiding it, but I didn't promote it either. I was just going to relax for a while and do nothing, which is one of my favorite things to do. My heroes are Winnie the Pooh and Baloo the Bear, so just whatever.
Okay. I noticed that some of the photos or illustrations you've done seems like you've incorporated them.
Yes. Oh, I love them. Well, I started learning Photoshop and Illustrator. I took some courses down there because I've always enjoyed artwork, but it was always a hobby. And then when I eventually ended up coming back to the States, I took this newfound hobby and started promoting all the shows I was doing by making my own flyers and posters.
Yeah.
Basically for social media, because I've been out of the country and pretty much out of the magic scene for 3 years. I thought it was important to kind of promote every little show I did. So that's why I just started blasting these posters out and had a great time doing those. I still do. I make them for other people too. But I just wanted to really push that I was doing shows, and statistically, it seems that more people will click on a picture than just words. So I just started doing, everything from 50s pulp covers to, like DJ posters I would see, and I'd adapt to magic, and
just kind of inspired by pop art in general.
What I have a wide range of tastes, I mean, I've got a Winnie the Pooh shelf over there, and I've got Demons from Hell over here. So everything in between.
And you lie in between there somewhere.
Exactly. I don't know that they're all from hell, but they're demons. So yeah.
I think it's important there when you said that you are also doing these sometimes for other people. It's important that people recognize they couldn't and shouldn't do it all, but you should farm this out to somebody else who is a professional in that case.
Absolutely. I mean, I think it's. I've always been a bit of a control freak myself, but any poster or flyer or book cover, whatever I do, I've got a few people that I send it to and say, what do you think of this? Just to get input. I still, my tastes aren't everybody's.
Well, I would think, again, some people would have seen the designs that you make and say, I kind of like that. I think I'll contact TC about maybe he could do something with me because I kind of like this look that he has.
Yeah, absolutely. I've done locally here in Florida. I mean, the whole state, I guess, isn't really locally, but I've done for Florida magicians. I've done quite a few posters for shows that were print posters that they were doing. They were putting up places and stuff. And yeah, I do whatever I can.
So you're bi-coastal, where you are now in Florida, but you started off in California, and and as mentioned, you had apparently been to the Magic Castle enough where they had seen you often enough to nominate you for just about every room in the house.
I'm very lucky. I'm one of the few people that have been nominated at that time in the 90s. I was nominated for all the major awards in 1 year. I was nominated for lecturer, close-up, parlor, and stage, all in 1 year.
All in 1 year.
Yeah, which was kind of cool. And I lost all those. So that was, felt a bit like Susan Lucci. Hey, there's something right in the zeitgeist, right? Okay.
Boy, that is true. This is broadcast all over the world, obviously. And for people who don't know who Susan Lucci is, she's a 27-time loser, but she, or something like that, of afternoon soap opera star who gets nominated every year. And I think she may have won recently.
She won eventually, but it was like 20 nominations without winning.
For the Emmy nominations of her work, but she's always recognized, but didn't quite make it each time. It's kind of funny. But between there, obviously, you were working then at the improv shop, I guess, and different comedy clubs in and around California.
I worked the improv a couple of times. I worked the Comedy Store. I worked the Laugh Stop down in Newport Beach, Long Beach Comedy Club. The one of the owners of Magic Island in Newport was Mike Cayley, and he was owner of the Laugh Stop. And he liked me at the Magic Island, so he got me to come in and do some emceeing at his comedy club. And that kind of was the springboard for me doing a lot of comedy clubs.
That reminds me of something. I remember the Magic and Comedy Club being advertised years ago, and for some reason I was thinking that converted into the Magic Island, but that's not the case. There were two separate places.
Two separate, yeah. The Magic Comedy Club, Mike Lacey, I think Mike is still involved, is down at Hermosa Beach, and it is, yeah, no, it's a totally separate place. Magic Island is in Newport Beach. Was in Newport Beach, basically built into the side of a parking structure in a very upscale little area. Maybe it was called Via Porto, I think it was, the little street, little pedestrian street. And yeah, it was just a private club that these guys, liked the Magic Castle and wanted to build something of their own, but make money at it. So they charged, right. There was a huge membership fee, and then there were still monthly fees. And I mean, people were, it was $1,000, night
entry
for
fees.
one person. Yeah, just to, for dinner and shows. It was a stupid amount of money. I got there in the year before the Olympics, 83, and I was 20, and I was making between $300 and $600 a week in tips.
Wow.
And I had never had a job. I literally dropped out of high school. I was making that in tips, and I was making, I think my starting salary was $500 a week. So I was like in heaven. I'm going, this was a dream come true for a 20-year-old that just was, this is all I wanted to do then. And it was my first gig.
I was thinking that the Magic Island actually, well, I know in Houston, of course, was kind of what they call country club billing. You went in to begin with, you give them your credit card, they gave you a number with a little card, and you used that all evening long. So you really didn't know how much your tally was going to be until you came out at the end of the evening. And I think that the biggest surprise of the evening was whenever you got your bill and you go, for what?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, that was, you came in with your membership card and everything went on that. Right. And I think for a while, they were, you just went in and charged everything in your card and you walked out. You signed something at the end of the night, but you didn't pay until
they would they'd bill you.
Yeah.
And well, that comes back again to the tips on there. I don't recall. Well, I got a couple of tips where people had given me cash, but I mean, I can count on one hand the number of tips I got over the years and years I worked in the Magic Island here in Houston. So did they tip you physically and give you bills, or did they add it on to the bill, or how did that work back then?
It was cash. And I mean, and this was, the early 80s. So cash was still flowing, I mean, it was just, I say tips, I would get paid a couple $100 to do a private show in a room that wasn't hosting a show at the moment.
Yep. Gotcha.
So, here's a couple $100 do something for my wife. And I'd go in there and we'd do a little, 15-minute private show for a couple $100.
Yeah. I remember one time doing a cardiographic as part of my regular show, and after it was over, a guy came back and said, "Hey, it was my wife's birthday. Can you sign this to her?" Because I had her as a volunteer, as it happened, and put her name on there, personalized it, and they gave me $100 just for that. So it wasn't like, again, the close-up strolling thing I was doing. It was actually got tipped afterwards by a patron for the stage show I did, which was kind of nice, completely unexpected, back then. Things have changed. And the Magic Island went through a lot of changes from the standpoint of it going from private to public. I know we just had quite a monumental shift in Houston when it went from one to the other. And for a short time, it was even, they had like, B actors or singers. I mean, we had like Tiny Tim and Frank Sinatra Jr., different people who came in for like about 6 months, and that just wasn't working. It had nothing to do with magic, nothing to do with comedy. They just had a stage, and they were trying to make this into some sort of a venue, which didn't work.
Yeah.
And so they also, of course, had gone from being a private club to a public club and just having a fee. And I believe they did the same thing then in Newport Beach. Isn't that right?
They did, and by the time they started doing that, the late 80s, the club was really kind of, it
On its
wasn't,
last legs.
yeah, it wasn't, there was really not, a couple came in, and I'll be damned if I can remember their names. Married couple came in and bought the Magic Island in Newport Beach with the sole purpose of finding investors to open up Wizards up on City Walk in studios, up in, Universal Studios.
Oh.
So they kept it kind of nice, but once they had their investors, they didn't care about it anymore because they were moving on to the bigger project.
So were they the ones who ended up creating Wizards?
Yes, and I followed them up there. I ended up working up there too. So,
which is still operating, I believe. Is that right?
that I do not know because I left California in 2000.
Right. Yeah.
I know that Fred Ward. I don't know if you ever knew Fred.
Yep. That's the name I was trying to think of, Fred Ward. He was the entertainment. He was like Scott Hollingsworth's counterpart. Yes. Yeah. Scott Hollingsworth was the entertainment director at the Magic Island here in Houston, and Fred was the one for Wizards. Yeah. Yep. And also, didn't Fred do the Magic Island in Newport Beach?
Sure did. Yes, he did. Yes, he did. The main showroom in Magic Island Newport Beach was the King Tut. Is that what it's called?
Palace of Tutankhamun.
Palace of Tutankhamun. And when I started there, and for a few years, probably 5 years, Mark Hendrickson was the host in that room. Mm-hmm. And he taught me a lot about emceeing. And then once he left, I ended up hosting for a while, and then Fred was a host, but he would come in and work with his wife, Wanda. Fred and Wanda. They were such nice people.
And then you were saying when you came to Houston and worked on a regular basis back then, Becky Blaney was booking at the time?
Becky was, I was there. I was there, I think, in 85 and 86 for probably 4-5 weeks at a time each, the beginning of each year. I came in for the New Year's Eve.
Back when you were both single and you had a crush on her.
Oh, yes, I did. Yeah.
As a lot of people did back then.
How could you not?
Yeah.
How could you not?
Very cute. Very nice lady.
She was adorable. I used to, on the New Year's Eve week, maybe, I don't know if Johnny Thompson and Pam were there for 2 weeks, and I went and picked them up at the airport, and that's the first time I ever met them, and it was beyond exciting for me. I mean, they were obviously heroes of mine, and to see Johnny Thompson was just livid when he came off the airplane.
Why is that?
He came, I was holding a sign. I stood there holding a sign. I went that far, stood at the gate, back when you could stand at the gate, stood at the gate with a sign. Obviously, I didn't need to because I would recognize them, but I got them, and Johnny walked past me and goes, "Yeah, okay, I'm here. Let's go get my bags." And Pam just looked at me and went, "Ignore him." And we're driving, and Johnny is sitting in the back, and he's just going, "Motherfucker, son of a mother." And I said, "Is there anything I can do?" And Pam looks at me, and pardon me, but she looks at me and says, "I'm sorry." And she turns around and says to Johnny, "Put a dick in it, will you?" And I was like, these guys are even better in person. It turns out that one of Johnny's, somebody he considered a friend, had stolen one of his jokes and used it on his stage. And Johnny was pissed.
Yeah.
He was so mad. And so when I was alone with Pam, I said, "What joke was it?" And it was, the joke was, "You guys are a great audience. I wish I had a better act."
Wow, that's an old joke, I thought.
Yes. But it was Johnny's. And Johnny, this was the next day, and Johnny and Pam, I invited them to come see my parlor show. Cleopatra's Chambers, I believe it was called.
This is it. Mm-hmm.
And because this was in Houston, and they came in, and I look out through the curtain, and Johnny's sitting there like this. I'm going, "Oh, he's still mad. I don't want him to see me in this mood." So I come out, and I do about 15 minutes, and he hasn't really smiled. Pam's laughing. And so I often say things while my brain is screaming, "Don't do that. Don't say that." But I can't stop it. So I just paused. I looked at the audience and I said, "You guys are a great audience. I wish I had Tom Sony's act." And he looked up and went, "Ha!" And then he was great. We were friends after that.
So that was a nice little twist, I guess, on
Yeah, it was
a little bit. Kind of take the sting out of that a little bit.
Yeah, so I had. Yeah, did you remember Ricky Dunn?
Boy, do I. Yes, I remember working with Ricky many a time. And he was a guy who could also, at just a drop of a dime, could just turn and get upset with the volunteers on stage. He was one of those guys who could be just on fire, or else he could really be on fire.
Yeah, absolutely. And our first meeting was cordial. I mean, I didn't know who he was really. I mean, I knew of him. I'm one of those guys that until I look in the mirror and realize I'm an old guy, I still like seeking. I always have looked to talk to the people that have been doing it longer than I have. Mm-hmm. I want their stories. I want to know, things. I just the way I am, and I knew that Ricky had been around, and so I wanted to talk to him. And he was cordial enough. He came to my show, and afterwards left without saying a word. And I was like, okay, maybe he was just in a hurry. And I tracked him down. And like I said, we had gone out to dinner, and he was really nice to me. And when I said, what'd you think of my show? And he said, well, I think of your show, you little punk. You stole my lesbian joke.
Oh, man.
I was like, what? And I'm racking my brain going, I don't do a lesbian joke. And it turns out that I used to do this line where I'd come out right at the beginning and notice whatever lady was in the front row. I would look at them and go, oh, hi, how are you? You know what? I think I'd like you for my wife. No, I think she'd like you.
Okay, I get it.
And
nice little double entendre.
Well, yeah, and I never considered it really a lesbian joke. I considered it a wife joke. Yeah. And when Ricky came in to yell at me out of nowhere, I thought, fine, you want to be angry? That's your deal. I'm not going to be involved. But he actually went out of his way to come into my dressing room 2 days later and start screaming at me about it again. And that's when I realized what the joke he was talking about was. And I said, I did not steal that joke from you. I stole that joke from Dorothy Parker. It's a Dorothy Parker line that she said to somebody.
That was a long time ago.
It was, back, I can't remember. It was an actor. It was a big-time actor at the time said to her, I'd like you for my wife. And Dorothy Parker said, well, you think she'd like me? So
that was the full line.
That was the joke.
Well,
and I just adapted it, and
sure.
And when I told Ricky that, he went, oh, right. All right, fine. And then we ended up being good friends, and I realized years later that his anger wasn't real. And
really?
He was.
Why was he doing that?
I don't know, but I know that he could turn it off and turn it on, because I was at the Magic Castle walking up the stairs, and he was having a go at the maitre d'. He was screaming. And it was Peter Mouey. He was screaming at him. He was going, you son of a bitch. I told you the table I wanted you. And he sees me and he's going, you son of a bitch. Hey, TC, how you doing? You son of a bitch. And I was like, what? He just turned it off. Hey, how you doing? And then right back to it. Right. So it wasn't, it was just a character for him, I think.
Well, I thought it was because one of those things is he was maybe testing you to see if you knew the provenance of that joke and what your skill or your knowledge, your depth of knowledge was. I think he, a lot of times, would tell people he had invented things full well knowing that he didn't, but thinking, okay, well, I will say this with such certainty that people will think, yeah, I guess he did. And if you disagree with him and you can tell him where it came from, then just as you'd said, you say, well, yeah, you're right. Right. But otherwise, the two guys I always thought was fun to get into a room together was Bev Bergeron and Ricky Dunn. Yes.
And I again, being very fortunate and that I was good friends with both of those guys.
Yeah,
that they both, at least to my face, liked me, which I can't ask for any more than that. I thought Ricky Dunn had one of the best promo ideas I'd ever seen. I didn't see it. I heard about it. I saw pictures of it. He took out, I think it was in the 70s, he took out a full-page ad in Variety in Los Angeles. And the full-page ad, all it said was, Ricky Dunn is a thief.
Oh, brilliant.
And then, of course, follow-up weeks later was, he's a pickpocket.
Sure.
But that I just love that because that got everybody going, who's Ricky Dunn? What did he do? You know?
Right.
I thought it was brilliant.
Yeah. A very smart guy. Anybody else you remember working with way back when?
Jules Lanier.
I didn't know Jules very well. I'd met him a time or two.
Jules was, because I grew up in Montana. I think I mentioned that to you at some point.
Yeah. Well, we've been friends for a long time. I mean, going back to Magic Island here. So when we first met, but yeah.
I grew up in Great Falls, Montana, and there were no magic shops. I learned magic through books from the library. Mm-hmm. And at my public library, they had an old Tannen's magic catalog.
Yeah.
I thought this was just brilliant. I mean, it's so thick. I don't know if you remember those catalogs. Hardback, 1,000 pages. I was just flipped to these.
And had some sort of a celebrity like Copperfield or Siegfried and Roy on the cover or something.
Yes.
Kind of thing, sure. Mm-hmm.
Yes. And I would read the descriptions and look at the little hand drawings of the items and try and figure out how the trick was done.
Yeah.
But then on my birthday or Christmas, I got to order something. My mother would call and order me something. And one of the things, I got some little pamphlets, and one was a Jules Lanier bank night thing. And it was basically you took a piece of wood and made an X out of it. And on each end of the X, you put a bulldog clip, and you had a little handle at the top, and suspended from each bulldog clip were 4 envelopes marked 1, 2, 3, and 4.
Right.
And you had the audience call them out, and you just lit them on fire, and the one that was left had a $100 bill in it. And simplicity. I mean, it was a brilliant, super easy, and I don't know if you know how to do that. These are only magicians listening to this, right?
That's correct. Yeah, so you can go ahead and expose a little bit there. Yeah, sure.
The $100 bill is folded up and put up inside the bulldog clip. It's in the envelope, but it's so when the fire burns,
being protected by the bulldogs. So there's a bill in every envelope.
Right. So I incorporated that into my show, and when I was 17, and then when I went to Magic Island in Newport Beach in '83, there's this little guy, and I'm not very big. I'm 5'9", and Jules was smaller than me, and I just knew he was this guy that read tarot cards in the lounge. Did they do that at Houston?
They did do tarot cards. Remember, there were psychics and fortune tellers, and they would read stones. I think
yes.
Marissa, not Meredith. What was her name? I remember.
Yeah,
they would read color swatches and stones right. and things like that. So crystal balls, palm reading. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So Jules was one of the psychics in the bar area in Newport Beach, and I just knew him as Jules. I never knew his last name, and I was so
connection in your mind from when you were a kid. No,
no, I was so overwhelmed with the whole place.
Exactly.
And my new boss was J.C. Wagner. I was living with Jerry Camaro, and all these acts were coming through, Francis and Willard, Glenn Falkenstein,
and
were coming through, Pendragons, all these guys that I'd read about. And one day after it was almost closed, and Jules wasn't doing a reading, and I would go and sit down and talk to him. And for whatever reason, I said, well, what is your last name? And he said, Lanier. I went, oh, okay. And I was like, wait a minute. Are you a magician? He went, yes. And I went, did you do it? He goes, yes. Oh, no. So it was just one of those, how stupid could I be? I've been talking to this guy for, a couple of weeks and then didn't realize who he was. But he was more than content just to sit and do readings.
Right.
And he made good money doing that.
I've had experiences like that where I'm talking to somebody and realize afterwards, like, oh, you're the guy who actually created that trick.
Yeah.
Yeah. There are a lot of people. That's why I think it's important that we understand and respect those who have gone on before us and recognize certainly that we are standing on the shoulders of giants, and we are just recreating something that they've already kind of paved the road for. That basically, we're just adding another level of asphalt across that.
Wait, are you saying that magic was not created on YouTube?
So I wanted to ask you about readings and tarot cards. So that's kind of a different thing in a direction. Certainly, as you said, that Jules had gone from magic into that. So you were inspired by him, or what was? I've got a lot of questions about this. Go ahead.
My life's path was pretty much set from when I was 10 years old. I spent about half, maybe 2/3 of my childhood in the hospital because I had severe asthma and eczema. And that's really how I got started in magic. When I was 10, it was a particularly bad year for me. And I was in the hospital about 9 months that year.
Yeah.
The way my illness was, it was I would be in for a couple of months and then out for a couple of months, in for a few weeks, out for a few weeks, just depending on how bad the flare-up was. But when I was 10, it was bad. And I used to read, I still read a lot. And my dad got me a book on, I tell audiences my dad got me a book on card tricks. This is the book my dad got me, The Phantom at the Card Table.
Phantom at the Card Table, yes.
Which is really about cheating at cards.
Who wrote that?
I should know this. Eddie McGuire. Eddie McGuire.
Not the name I was thinking. Okay.
But he got me this, and he gave me a deck of cards because he thought that would occupy my time while I was sitting there.
Sure.
And it did. I loved it. And for a week, I'm sitting here shuffling cards that aren't here. For a week, I'm practicing with these cards. And I called her Grandma Jenny, but she was actually my mother's grandmother. She was my great-grandmother, came to visit me and saw me playing with the cards. And she said, I didn't know you liked cards. Here, let me show you mine. And she brought out tarot cards. And my dad would show up to the hospital for a visit. I would practice my card tricks with him. My great-grandma would show up, and I would practice my tarot cards with her. And that's, like I said, that's all I've ever done. And
you were about how old at the time when you were doing that?
10 years old.
10 years old, doing tarot readings.
I was learning the tarot.
Yeah.
To be honest, I didn't know they were tarot cards, and I didn't know I was learning to do readings. You're familiar with the tarot cards.
Absolutely. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So my grandma...
I've done a little bit of reading myself. That's why I want to get into some of this.
Yeah, my grandma would bring out her deck, which was an old Rider-Waite style deck, and she would take out a few cards and show them to me and tell me stories about the people in the cards. In my child brain, I thought at the time that this was some kind of, like storybook that she had taken apart.
Oh, so, sure, of course.
So here are some pages, so she's just showing me these cards and what they mean. And she wasn't saying this is what this card means. She was saying, you see this guy? He's doing this because of this. And, it was a year later. I was like, oh, I get what these are now. And I loved them. I love tarot cards. I love doing readings. I know that there are magicians that are going to be I can hear their eyes rolling now. And I don't care. But that's... when I moved to LA, Southern California, Newport Beach, I was doing the magic at the Magic Island at night, and I found a place, a little store that sold crystals and stuff, and I did readings during the day there under my real name. I don't want to shock anybody here, but TC Tahoe, not my given name. My name is Christian Lang. So I did tarot card readings under my real name, and I did, comedy and magic under TC Tahoe because I didn't think they should be combined because I thought magicians are going to hate me and think that I'm just, stealing people's money, ripping them off because magicians like to get on a soapbox for some reason. And I thought
really?
if my tarot card clients find out I'm a magician, they're going to go, oh, well, you're just cheating at cards here with me. So I really did keep it separate. And it really wasn't until I moved to Ecuador in, 2013 or something like that. The years all blur together.
Yeah.
But when I was living in Ecuador, for the first year, I think I mentioned, I didn't really tell anybody I was a magician. Mm-hmm. I wasn't really burned out on magic, but I wasn't in love with it anymore. And I brought a bunch with me, but it was just for me. I didn't really do anything for anybody else. So there's a big expat community. There's a bunch of Canadians, Americans, and people from the UK in Ecuador. And they have gringo nights, 3 nights a week in different bars. They would all get together. So I started doing readings for all these retired people they were all mostly hippies, all about 10 years older than me, all had been to Woodstock, so they were into it. And it was, like I said, a full year before anybody found out that I was a comedian and a magician. And
And
once
did
they
that kind of start the ball rolling? And they're saying, "Holy cow! Would you do something more for me? And would you come over and do this or that?" Or
absolutely, it was.
it's like you hadn't moved from Ecuador then. You moved. You moved to Nigeria.
It alleviated a lot of. It made me think, why did I waste all this time keeping it separate? Because nobody cared. None of my people who knew me as a tarot card reader cared that I also did card tricks and told jokes.
They were able to separate that. They didn't think you're doing trickery when you're doing readings and vice versa.
Exactly. And when I did my first public show down in Ecuador, then when my clients would come to me, I would tell them the story of how I learned both magic and tarot cards, and they were like, "Oh, okay, that's cool. You had a neat grandma." So that made me realize people will accept it, and that really was a turning point for my show. My show really did change after that, in that I incorporated
Your magic show.
My magic show. Sorry, yeah, my magic show really did change, and it allowed me to do this show I call Odd Wonders, because I could incorporate everything. That it made it an easy transition to go from comedy to tarot cards to psychic to bizarre stuff. It made it all flow really nicely for me, and by just telling the truth, which was such an odd thing for a magician to do. I'm just telling them the truth, and they're going, "Oh, that's very cool." In fact, I did a show down. I'm not good at geography. Everything is, no matter where I am in the world, everything is down.
Okay.
Down in Castle Rock for Joe and Carol.
Joe and Carol Massey. Yeah, Carol, Joe Givens. Yeah.
Yeah, they're Theater of Dreams.
Theater of Dreams.
I did my show there, and they wanted 90 minutes.
Right.
And I have always been. Anytime anybody hires me for anything, they go, "Oh, you can do an hour." It's like, sure, yeah. Not at that point, I never had, but I figured I can do it. So I did, for Joe's show, I did my 45, 50 minutes of stand-up comedy magic. And then I sat down at the table and I told some stories about my dad, which is my close-up show, essentially. But it's more story-oriented. And that transitioned into talking about Grandma Jenny and going into the bizarre storytelling. And the feedback I got from the audience, and I wasn't looking for it, but I'd go out and mingle after the shows, and repeatedly lay people would say to me, "I really liked how you did your show, and then the second half was you just telling us about your life." Even though the second half had much more magic in it, they looked at it as, biographical, and that I was just telling them about me. And that's when I realized audiences really want to know about us. And if you look at your singers, bands and stuff, the things that, when you go see them in concert, certainly the things that I love are when they sit down in a stool and say, "You know why I wrote this song? It was because of this."
Exactly.
And that's something that people want to hear. They want to get to know you,
I agree. Penn and Teller have talked about that. Then also, people are not interested in seeing the mystery or the ring disappeared or it comes back on a keychain. All great tricks or whatever. However, people want to know about you. And they want to know the stories behind you. And when you start to sit down with them and you are sharing those kinds of personal stories and history about yourself, I think that's what resonates most. For an example, recently Derek Delgadio had finished 552 performances of In and of Itself in New York City, and then there's the video that's on Hulu, produced by Steve Carell and his wife. Anyhow, during a portion of that show, he sits down, and as he is shuffling the cards expertly, he is talking about his years of being, well, kind of a crooked gambler, I guess, and the kind of the underside, the seedy people he had dealt with. And then he was just throwing out some hands and basically controlling the cards. But he was talking all the time and not trying to display this great skill that he had. It just happened to flow with the rest of the story. And I think that that's part of the whole show that resonated the most, of him talking about that, which he then, I guess, had put into a book, A Moral Man, Truths and Other Lies, or something like that, which is available. Anyhow, so I think it's still important. I, at the end, will do my show many times after doing a lot of fun things or funny things. We'll do a gypsy thread in which I'm talking about my life and different things when I'm growing up and leaving home, going to college, getting married, having a child or another child, and then them growing up, and then my wife getting ill and passing, and me going on, and then kind of the whole thread of life of what happens if people get to know me through that emotional story. And that's what they will remember and come and talk about. And it's not like, oh man, how'd you make that card rise out of that piece of paper, or, or whatever. It's about you, about me. That's what they make, that personal connection. I think that's why storytelling is great. And you do a lot of storytelling, isn't that right?
I do. And I've always loved it. And most of my career, if people know me from anything, it's being really wacky and very energetic on stage. My whole opening is very, very fast. Okay. To the point where a lot of people are uncomfortable because they're like, "Is this going to be a whole hour of this?" And then it calms down. But
I can't keep up with that pace.
Yeah, it's very Jonathan Winters, Robin Williams-esque. I like that. I like that energy. I like that improv nature. So it was nothing I ever really incorporated into my shows until 8 years ago or so. And the shows have been much more fulfilling for me because this is what I've always liked. I've got a lucky card. I tell, this is a story I tell in the show. It started off as a trick, and I realized that the trick doesn't need to happen because the story, people like the story. They don't care about the trick. The story is what they like, and it gets a better reaction without it being a trick. And
I've heard people talk about, some magicians who will talk about having too many stories. In other words, you can overtell, going from one story to another story, and then it becomes just a show full of stories. So I think you do have to be somewhat selective. So with that in mind, do you limit your stories to one or two, maybe three throughout the whole presentation? And if so, how long is each story? And what's your thought on that?
In my what I like to call my odd wonder show, I do some comedy magic so they can see my personality. I like comedy. I like being both silly and smart, if that makes sense. I like to play my own straight man, so I can be a straight man and I can be the stupid one also.
Sure.
And then when I sit down at the table, the stand-up comedy, then I sit at the table and I bring out a deck of cards and I start talking about my childhood and my father as I'm doing some card stuff. It's really a story, but again, showing, that I do know how to use cards. And then that is a little 5-minute story, card sleight routine. And then I just go and do, a few cards things. And then I transition into a story about my grandma Jenny. And that is just a story. There's no trick there. It's just a story.
It's a nice segue.
It's a the stories are wonderful segues because now the grandma Jenny story is a sweet story, still personal, but then has that little bit of bent on the supernatural. Mm-hmm. And then it goes into the more bizarre, mind reading, whatever you want to call it, stuff. Bizarre is it seems to be a loaded term. I mean, when regular magicians talk about bizarre magic, they think it's blood and all H.P. Lovecraft, and it's really not. I mean, there obviously are aspects of that, but it's not all that. I mean, I would look at someone like David Parr, brilliant magician, wonderful storyteller, and it's not full of blood and guts. It's full of history and stories that I don't think laymen are looking at going, oh, that is, that's creepy. Bizarre. It's so transition.
Yeah, our definition of what is bizarre versus what the lay people, and even some among magicians will consider it the different levels of bizarre. I was just thinking about Tony Andruzzi, for an example. I
Yes.
think of him as being a bizarre type of a magician,
Sure.
and he transitioned, of course, from having a comedy act, which he either gave or sold to Johnny Thompson, which Johnny did that act, as he went into the more bizarre kind of thing that he was doing.
And he did what he loved. I mean, he did do more spooky, bizarre things and kind of started that. And I think that's what inspired a lot of people, which is why for a long time
yes.
there was a lot of, H.P. Lovecraft and vampires and that kind of stuff in bizarre magic. But it's not, it's like, I saw Slidini as a kid and that's what I wanted to do. And I emulated him. So I think that's why it gets, people just think of Andrew, they think of Tony and they think that's bizarre magic when it's bizarre magic is really storytelling magic.
Is there really an arc, if you will, from the beginning to the end of your show? Do you build it so that you have callbacks throughout your show? You're talking about having segues of stories from one to the next. Do you kind of feel the way you script your show that you do have this arc?
Yes, I believe so. Whether it's apparent to anybody in the audience or not, I do not know.
Okay, but you have an intellectual intent to do that.
I do. I have a rudimentary. This is for any tarot card readers. I have a rudimentary version of the Fool's Journey in my show. It goes from me being naive and goofy and silly to more reflective, to then more meaningful. Hopefully, that's the way it plays out. Mm-hmm. Because it does end. It ends on a fairly serious note. My comedy show does. So,
okay, and so that's kind of funny that you would not leave them laughing. You leave them wondering, I guess, huh?
Yeah, it's like I said. I end on a fairly serious, what is meaningful for me, and I've seen people and talked to them afterwards, and they get what I'm doing, but I have added in an encore that nobody asked for to leave them on a bit. It's twofold. My show goes from the comedy to the sleight of hand. This is the way it is in my head: comedy, sleight of hand, bizarre mind reading storytelling, and once I shift to the Grandma Jenny portion of the show, which is all the bizarre and storytelling stuff, I'm no longer as funny. I can't not be funny because that's my nature. My nature is to mock. And so I will make fun of myself even during serious routines. But I end the show with a slate routine and a personal story. And I sit back and then I say, do you guys want to see one more trick like from before? And I really do that, and it works well in a theater setting because it really does cement in their minds, wait, the stuff you just did, that wasn't a trick? It makes them question, if I'm saying it like that, oh, you know what, that was good, it's a little bit heavy, let's go back to the fun stuff. You want to see another trick? As opposed, I'm not saying as opposed, but I'm implying as opposed to what I've been doing.
Right.
And then it's an upbeat musical thing. So
yeah, you don't give a disclaimer or anything beforehand, but you let them kind of make it up in their mind of whether this is real or not.
And it's, like I tell a story about, my Grandma Jenny and how she taught me how to make a wish come true, which is all true. And it's, a little metaphysical, a little magical, but it's true. And most of it's true. I should say that. Most of the stories I tell are true. And I think that is the important thing when doing a storytelling or doing any kind of storytelling, is that some of it has to be true and it has to be faithful to who you are. When I remember being a kid and saying, oh, I have here this jar that I got in Tibet. I was like, I'm 12. When did I go to Tibet? And unfortunately, magicians don't always put themselves into their magic, which I think is a big mistake. People can, even if everything I say is not true, enough of it is true where people understand that what I'm telling them is true. Does that make sense?
It does, actually. in a funny way. That's true. And
I stopped listening to myself about 5 minutes ago. Sorry.
Along that line, did you transition then also into doing seances? I mean, I've done a lot of seances then as well. That seems to be a natural progression, I would think, from psychics and fortune tellers and tarot cards and bizarre.
Mentalism, bizarre, seance stuff has always been a passion of mine. It's nothing I ever thought I could really pull off, because when I'm on stage, I'm still in that improv mode where I'm still looking for a laugh. So unless I approach it as an actor, which, I have some background in that, unless I approach it like that, it's never really comfortable for me. But yeah, I did a theatrical seance, which was more of a play. Remember that old play, The Wedding, Italian people getting married? It's
No.
an immersive play where I think it's like Tony and Tina's wedding, where
Fat Tony's Wedding or something like that?
yeah, where you buy tickets and you show up. Basically, the actors are all around you, and you don't know who an actor is or who another cast member is.
Yes.
And you're part of this
It's
wedding.
an immersive experience, yeah.
Exactly, and that's the way I like my seances.
Okay.
Because it allows you to, the pre-seance was a little cocktail party, and I had people in there getting information. Here, this is Susie. She's going to test your ESP, and she would go through some tests, but she'd also find out information. Now we're gathering information without them really knowing it before we go into the seance room. So yeah, I like the immersive thing. I
have, along with Jamie Salinas, done seances for a long number of years, and we try to approach it from different ways of whether we're going to be a real genuine psychic. Are you trying to have someone who's going to lead you? Or are you going to try and contact the other world? All kinds of things and different emotions and all that will bring up. And we finally settled upon of us just basically being ghost hunters in a way. We're still questioning this. We're still wondering, like you are. We don't know what's really out there, if anything at all. And so let's go on this exploration together and see if we can find something.
And I think that's a great way to do it, because you're basically becoming one of the audience members then at that point, because that's their frame of mind too.
Yeah, that's true. Where do you find that you can perform these seances? Do you go into people's homes and do that? I assume you do that tarot readings privately, but when it comes to seances, have you found like a public venue where you can go and perform? Or
you know what? To be honest, I have not done any seance stuff in a couple of years. Not since I've been back from Ecuador.
But when you did beforehand, when you were doing those, did you do those privately, or did you ever do public shows?
I mostly do them privately, but I had a magic shop for a couple of years in Burbank, California, called Mind Over Magic.
Mind Over Magic.
And that was a horrible experience.
I was about to say, what were you thinking to open up a brick and mortar magic shop?
I was not thinking. I was thinking I was doing cruise ships, and I wanted to be home a bit more. But because I was known at the castle, I'd get a lot of magicians, come to the store. And I didn't understand, because I'm slow on the uptake. I did not understand why I was exhausted at the end of every day. And
you were burning too many candles at too many ends.
Well, finally, Leslie pointed out to me, you are sitting there giving advice. You are essentially doing an 8-hour lecture every day for these people. And because if somebody says, hey, I'm thinking of doing this, I have never been a great salesman. Leslie's like, give them your card and say, you can do a one-on-one class with them. I would just go, well, I would do it like this. And if let me write a couple lines for you, because I think this would be a good, I'm not a good salesman. I just give it away.
Well, you were nominated as being the Lecturer of the Year by the Academy of Magical Arts. What did you and what do you lecture on then now? I
Everything.
mean, all the things we've just been talking about, as far as magic, mentalism, tarot, and everything, and comedy.
I wrote, it's funny. There are certain groups of magicians that I wrote a book called In the Play of Shadows, which is all tricks with tarot cards, all storytelling tricks with tarot cards. I wrote a pendulum book, a big ass pendulum book. My section is small. I say it's a great book because it's got Jeff McBride. It's got I think Dan Sperry's. There's a lot of people contributed to it, simply because I was doing a lecture. I've always been a fan of pendulums, and I was saying in one of my lectures, you can do a lot of pendulum work, and I teach people how to use a pendulum. And my good friend Eric Olson said, "Why don't you sell a little pendulum book with your tricks in it?" And I went, "Yeah, okay, you know what? Because I'm not a salesman. Yes, that's a great idea. Thank you." So I sat down and wrote this little pendulum book. It's like, it was like 20 pages. And I wrote to my friend Richard Webster in New Zealand. And I said, would you mind, since Richard was the one that really got me going on pendulums. I said, would you contribute something to this? He went, sure. And he sends me something and he goes, oh, I mentioned it to Doc Hilford. And then I get an email from Doc going, here's a routine for your book. And it just kind of steamrolled into this, 600-page book on whether you approach pendulum as magic with a K, bizarre stuff, or scientifically. It's all in this book.
Wow.
And so,
what's the name of the book?
It's called TC Tahoe Swingers Party.
Swingers Party, because I got it. Okay, the pendulum swinging, yeah.
As it says in the introduction, it's called the Swingers Party because my wife wouldn't let me call it TC Tahoe, Why I Swing Both Ways.
Good for her.
Yeah.
She kept you on a leash there on that one.
Yes, she did. But I've written a lot of books that are mentalism and bizarre. So I went and did the East Coast Spirit Sessions, which is a wonderful convention, a small convention in January in Myrtle Beach. And I went to this bizarre magic convention because I wanted to try out my mentalism and bizarre storytelling stuff, because a lot of magicians that I know were like, well, that's bizarre magic. And I'm like, it's not compared to what I think of as bizarre magic. So I went to this convention really to see if they would accept it, if it really was bizarre magic. You know what I mean?
Right.
So I went there and I was laying things out on my table in the dealer's room. And one of my books is called TC Tahoe, His Bizarre Side. And a guy came up and goes, your bizarre side? What's your other side? These guys only knew me from the books and the magazine that I published.
Oh.
They didn't really know that I was a comedian.
Yeah.
So it was interesting because I did a magazine for 2 years called Mind Over Magic.
There was a convention then for a while, also, again, going back to Tony Andruzzi, they started the thing. I mean, long before the Mindvention in Vegas that Danny Archer was doing, but there was another one I know that Doc Hilford and Rick Maui and all these other guys who would attend. What am I trying to think of? What was that called? It was a bizarre convention. I think they held it in Chicago. I think the PEA may sponsor it.
Maybe it was the Weird Weekend, but that was...
that's it. No, it is the Weird Weekend. That's what I was thinking of.
Well, Vince, do you know Vince... Vince Wilson?
Sure do. I had him on an episode some time ago around Halloween. Yeah.
Vince is great. Vince is great because he is keeping this whole bizarre movement alive. He's got the Bizarre Hauntings coming up in
Baltimore,
and he's doing one day is going to be a celebration of Weird Weekend. So,
okay, because I was about to say we haven't had a Weird Weekend then in years, right?
Yeah, so you're going to have one this year. So
interesting.
Well,
there were just a ton of stuff we've talked about and covered over here. As we start to draw to a close, I want to ask you, but the name of my podcast is called the Magic Word Podcast, which means I always like to know from my guests, what is it that inspires them and what is it that keeps you going each day and gives you encouragement? What is not necessarily a word. I don't mean like abracadabra either. What is your philosophy of life? What do you live by?
I have I have really tried to live by, Baloo, the bear, that, the bare necessities that as you look around, I've got tons of crap, but
don't we all?
I like his philosophy of just floating down the river, don't work too hard, just go with it, which might explain why not many people know who I am, because I am not. I have never been, much to Leslie's chagrin, I have never been one to look for work. I have never been one to pursue big work goals. I did a bunch of stuff for the Disney Channel in the mid 80s, and I hated it, and I didn't do it again. I thought, I don't want to do TV. I was working at Caesar's Magical Empire in their big parlor room, the Dragons. It was great. And Gary Ollett was filming one of his magic specials at the time there.
Yeah.
And one of his producers came in and said, TC, Gary would like you to do something for the show. And I just said, no, thank you. And it was like, no, to perform something for the show. And
That's
I went,
not the expected answer.
no. And I just said, I appreciate it, but no. And then like 15 minutes later, Gary came over and said, I think there was a misunderstanding. I want you to perform for the show. I went, I thoroughly appreciate it. It means a lot that you'd ask, but I don't have any interest in doing TV. It's just not, my energy doesn't come across. I don't like the end product. I don't have control over the editing. I just don't like it. Mm-hmm. So I could have, been on a lot of TV shows, and I just chose not to. I mean, I'm happy doing just what I enjoy doing. I just want it to just, and that's really, do what makes you happy. Honestly, I don't have a lot of money in the bank, but I'm happy. So what more could I ask for?
Yeah, you have been doing what makes you happy, basically, is what you're saying, and stay true to your belief of what you want to do that makes you happy. Yeah, as much as I hate the saying, follow your bliss, do what makes you happy. You know what? If making millions of dollars makes you happy, then go for it. But I just want enough money where I'm comfortable and don't have to worry about rent. Right. Yeah. I mean, how many millions do you need to be happy at some point? Whatever it's going to be. I'll plug this real quick. This is what I lecture on a lot. Master of Ceremonies. Okay. This is a little book I wrote. I, for whatever reason, fell into something in LA for years. Throughout the 90s, I became known as the guy to MC shows. I would always get hired to be the MC. Mm-hmm. And is that a book of how to be an MC, or are there gags and? There are some gags in it, but it's mostly the way I MC, the way I look at it, my philosophy on hosting and emceeing. Yeah. I ended up writing the book because when I was working for Carnival Cruise Lines for years, I started helping them train their hosts. Because, they'd get 19, 20-year-old kids that have never held a microphone. And right. I remember one girl came on and she was doing this, and we've got bingo at the back. This is her microphone. We got bingo over here. We've got swimming contest. So pointing at the microphone instead of keeping it by her face. Yeah, exactly. Just some basic things you should know. Yeah. So I put together a whole little lecture for them, and I went, well, I should be doing this for magicians too. So you can get this from me at tctahoe.com, or TC at tctahoe.com is my email. tctahoe.com. You can reach me from the website. You can get it on library.com. You can get the physical book from amazon.com. There's a few of my books on there. That sounds great. Not a good salesman. Find them, buy them if you want. Find them, buy them. Yeah, it sounds like you got a nice philosophy of life, just kind of floating on your back down the river. Yeah. No retirement fund, but hey. You can float off into the sunset. There you go. I have the same retirement plan that the big Irishman, Irish comic magician, Billy McComb. Good Lord. Oh, Billy McComb. Yes. Billy McComb said to so I was standing next to him when they were having a serious conversation about IRAs and, the future. And Billy said, my retirement plan is I'm going to work until I die. I was like, yeah, you know what? Because I don't really see myself wanting to stop. So as long as people are going to keep paying me, that's my plan too. Just kind of be, I guess, like Tommy Cooper and just go, while you're performing. Yep, exactly. Well, this has been just a superb, wonderful hour. Thanks very much, TC. Great catching up with you, my friend. Thank you. It was great seeing you and catching up with you, too. I can't believe it's been an hour. Wow, time flies, just like the years have over the last. I look forward to seeing you in the real world here sometime soon. I hope so. And so until next time, that was TC Tahoe, and this is Scotty out. Thank you, TC. That was really lovely. Thanks again for being my guest this week on this episode of the Magic Word Podcast. You shared a lot of information and we covered a lot of territory in such a short amount of time. And as the listeners and viewers can tell, certainly there was more than just meets the eye there. And we could have gone down so many different rabbit holes, so to speak, off on different tangents to have talked about cruise ships and so many other things then as well. But I think we covered a lot of interesting things and some food for thought that you gave some people there in your conversation and your advice then as well. So I thank you very much for being here this week as my guest, and I also thank you viewers for tuning in. If you like this, make sure that you subscribe to the Texas Magician here on the on YouTube channel. And of course, subscribe to the pod letter when you go to themagicwordpodcast.com. So until next week, stay well, get booked, and remember not to take things too seriously and to follow your bliss. This is Scotty out.